It was just another Wednesday night on late-night television, or so everyone thought. Jimmy Kimmel strolled onto the stage in his usual crisp suit and playfully disarming grin. The crowd welcomed him with the standard burst of applause and polite laughter as he began his monologue with the familiar cadence of late-night comfort. But what no one in the studio or watching from home could have anticipated was that the next 45 minutes would erupt into one of the most uncomfortable, confrontational, and widely discussed moments in modern broadcast history. And at the center of it all stood Michael B. Jordan, actor, director, and, as of that night, a man who would redefine what it meant to walk off a stage with your dignity intact. Jordan had arrived at the studio earlier that evening. As he had countless times before, his demeanor professional and easygoing. His team, however, had been firm on one point. There were to be no questions about his recent breakup, no thinly veiled gossip about his personal life, and absolutely no commentary on the rumors swirling around his relationships. It was standard practice. He was there to promote his latest directorial project, a socially conscious drama that had already garnered early acclaim. His publicist had run through the talking points with the show's producers, ensuring a clear understanding. The rules were simple, but Jimmy Kimmel wasn't in the mood to play by them. When Michael finally stepped onto the set, to a round of applause and the warm stage lights, he looked every bit the star, graceful, confident, immaculate, in a dark navy suit that hugged his frame with precision. He flashed that signature smile, shook hands with Jimmy, and settled into the guest chair with poise. But Kimmel, perched in his leather swivel seat, didn't offer the usual lighthearted welcome. His grin was sharper than usual, more predatory than playful. Something in his posture, his shoulders slightly forward, his hands fidgeting with the question cards, telegraphed tension. Viewers at home might not have noticed it immediately, but those in the studio audience could sense it before a word was even spoken. Michael Kimmel began, his voice teetering on that dangerous line between charm and challenge. "You're looking pretty good for a guy who's had a rough couple of months, huh?" The words slid across the air like a thin blade, barely coated in civility. Michael's smile faltered, just slightly, for a fraction of a second, then it returned, measured and professional. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy," he replied, adjusting his suit jacket with casual grace. "I'm here to talk about the film. It's something really close to my heart." Jimmy leaned back, not missing a beat. "Oh, we'll get to the film. But first, let's talk about you. Personally, I mean, you've had your name in the tabloids more than a Kardashian this past month. How are you holding up, really?" There was a faint shuffle in the audience, a ripple of discomfort. Even those who came for light fun could tell this wasn't going to be business as usual. Michael's expression hardened just a hair, his voice still composed. "I'm doing great, Jimmy, focused on work. This project means a lot to me." But Kimmel wasn't interested in film reels or artistic process. He leaned in, hands now folded, voice laced with something unspoken. "Yeah, but come on, man. I mean, between your dating history and all those Instagram unfollows, there's gotta be a story there, right? You don't just go from red carpet to radio silence for no reason." Michael inhaled deeply through his nose, slow and steady. "You know, I'm not here to talk about that. We agreed, your producers agreed this would be about the film." Kimmel's grin widened as he played to the crowd, who remained unusually quiet. "I mean, you're Michael B. Jordan, you're a big boy. I'm sure you can handle a few real questions." Michael's posture shifted ever so slightly. He leaned forward just enough to signal that the game had changed. "Let me ask you something, Jimmy," he said calmly. "Why do you think it's okay to ignore a boundary that was clearly set?" The crowd didn't laugh. No applause followed. Kimmel paused for a second too long before answering. "Because this is my job. My job is to ask questions people want to know. And let's be real, nobody tunes in just to hear about lighting techniques and script development. They want the juice." Michael stared at him, unblinking. "Then maybe they should pick a different show. Because I came here as a filmmaker, not a headline." Jimmy's eyes sparkled, sensing he'd touched a nerve. "Ah, come on, don't be so sensitive. It's not like I'm accusing you of anything. Just asking questions." "You keep saying that," Michael replied sharply, "like asking questions gives you immunity. It doesn't, especially not when the questions are designed to provoke, not to understand." Kimmel chuckled, but there was no real joy in it. "Provoke? You sound like a politician." Michael leaned in even further, his voice cool and precise. "And you sound like a host who doesn't know when to stop." The temperature in the studio had dropped. The lights still blazed overhead, but everything felt colder. The crowd was now caught between fascination and secondhand embarrassment. A few heads turned toward the crew at the edges of the set. Michael's publicist stood frozen in the wings, her phone clutched in white-knuckled hands. She knew what was coming in. She knew there was no stopping it. Kimmel, now unable to retreat without appearing weak, pushed forward with casual cruelty. "So all this mystery, all this privacy, what is it really? Damage control? Brand repositioning?" Michael didn't answer immediately. He let the words hang there, sour and heavy. Then, with a voice that vibrated with quiet authority, he said, "No, it's called dignity. Something I still try to maintain, even when people like you test it. People like me. Jimmy laughed, but it was tight. What does that mean? It means people who pretend to be harmless, but enjoy cornering others just to get a reaction. Michael said, "You don't want the truth, Jimmy. You want a clip, a headline, a viral moment." The audience shifted again. Nervous laughter, silence. The moment was tipping. And then Jimmy, with the sort of recklessness that comes when a person senses they've already gone too far, doubled down. "All right, since you're so into being real," he said, flipping a card, "how about we talk about those photos? The ones from 2 weeks ago with that model, who know?" Michael snapped. The word was sharp and immediate. "We're done with that." "Why?" Jimmy asked. "What's the big secret?" "Because this isn't TMZ," Michael said, rising slowly from his chair. The audience gasped. "And I'm not your puppet." Jimmy raised both hands in mock surrender. "Relax, it's just a talk show." "No, Jimmy," Michael replied, voice low and controlled. "It's your stage, your weapon. You invite people here to humiliate them under the guise of jokes. But I'm not playing that game." He reached down, unclipped his mic, and dropped it onto the guest chair with a dull click. The studio had gone dead silent. "You've got what you wanted," Michael said. "Your drama, your moment. But you should know this says a hell of a lot more about you than it does about me." Then he turned and walked off stage without a single glance back. The silence that followed was so thick, even Jimmy didn't try to speak. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every stunned face in the room. Somewhere backstage, a showrunner was screaming into a headset. But none of it mattered. The moment was already out in the world. The moment Michael B. Jordan disappeared behind the curtain, the tension that had held the audience captive didn't break it calcified. Jimmy Kimmel stood on stage, frozen, microphone still in hand, but his confidence had left him. The forced smile he had worn so convincingly just minutes earlier had dissolved, replaced by a blank, shell-shocked expression. His eyes darted toward the control room where producers were waving, shouting, panicking, but Jimmy didn't hear them. He heard only silence. Not a single laugh, not a single clap, just the echo of Michael's final words ringing in his ears. And then, applause. It started slow. One or two people clapping, not out of support, but disbelief, like trying to fill the vacuum of awkwardness. Then, scattered throughout the studio, others joined in. Not for Jimmy, for Michael. They weren't clapping for a bit or a performance. They were clapping for a man who had just stood up and walked out with his integrity intact. Jimmy blinked. He swallowed. Then, almost mechanically, he stepped back to his desk and said into the camera with a cracked voice, "We'll be right back after this." The show cut to commercial, but no one backstage was smiling. The moment the cameras went dark, chaos erupted in the studio. Jimmy's executive producer stormed out from behind the control booth, headset askew, shouting for someone to stop the online stream. The network's PR team had already formed a human wall in the hallway, preparing for the fallout they all knew was coming. Michael's team was gone. He'd left the building entirely. His car, idling outside during the segment, now whisked him away in silence. While the internet was already doing what it does best, explode. Within 15 minutes, hashtags like #MichaelB.Jordan and #Kimmel canceled were trending across platforms. TikTok was flooded with clips of the confrontation. Twitter was ablaze with hot takes, outrage, memes, and side-by-side comparisons of Jimmy's behavior with past interviews where he'd pulled similar stunts. The narrative was crystal clear. Michael had walked in to talk about a film, and instead, had been ambushed, humiliated, and accused live on national television. But the part that shocked even hardened entertainment journalists was the last line from Kimmel. The veiled threat, the insinuation, the thing you never say on live TV. Some very young company. Those 4 words took on a life of their own. That line set everything on fire. A clip of Michael's immediate responses whispered, "You sick piece of garbage," was reposted. Across all corners of the internet, from fan accounts to news outlets, celebrities began weighing in, most siding with Michael. The tone was unambiguous. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was character assassination. By the next morning, The Hollywood Reporter had released a special edition with the headline, "Kimmel Implodes, the Night America Turned on Late-Night TV." The fallout was swift and unrelenting. Sponsors started pulling advertising from the show before the morning ratings even came in. Brands didn't want their products associated with the disaster. The network's legal department met in emergency sessions as executives huddled in conference rooms, debating whether to issue a suspension, an apology, or a termination. But none of it stopped the public. Michael, meanwhile, released a single statement via his Instagram, a black and white post with white text that read, "No man should ever be put in a position where his silence is mistaken for weakness. I stood up for my boundaries, my character, and my name. That is not a meltdown. That is self-respect." The post hit over 10 million likes in 3 hours. Jimmy, however, remained uncharacteristically quiet. His team scrambled behind the scenes to do damage control. They crafted multiple versions of public apologies. One blaming the heat of the moment, another citing a breakdown in communication with the guest team. But none of them made it past review. None of them could erase what the world had already seen with their own eyes. Then came the real blow. Several former guests, quiet until now, began sharing eerily similar experiences. One actress revealed how Jimmy had blindsided her with questions about a miscarriage she'd privately disclosed to producers beforehand. Another actor posted a video montage of Kimmel's most disrespectful moments, calling him the smiling executioner. A well-known journalist tweeted, "We don't need comedy to be cruel." What Michael B. Jordan showed last night wasn't just bravery, it was leadership. The industry was shifting. On the third day after the broadcast, Jimmy Kimmel finally addressed the situation on his show, but it was not the apology many were expecting. He opened the episode with somber music, an empty stage behind him, no band, no audience, just a single spotlight. He stood there alone, visibly smaller, his voice heavier. "I've made a career out of asking hard questions," he began, "and sometimes those questions cross a line. Last week, I crossed that line." He paused, the silence lingering. What happened between me and Michael B. Jordan was not scripted, not premeditated, and not professional, and I take full responsibility for that. He looked down, hands clasped. But there's something more important I need to say. When we use our platforms to exploit instead of uplift, to attack instead of understand, we lose more than just a moment. We lose trust, we lose humanity. And I lost a lot that night. He stepped back from the mic, then continued. To Michael, if you're watching, sorry. Not just because of the fallout, but because you came here in good faith. And I broke that faith. There was no applause, no audience to forgive him, just a quiet fade to black. But it was too late. The following morning, ABC released a statement announcing a temporary hiatus for Jimmy Kimmel Live. In light of recent events, it read, "We are reevaluating the tone and structure of the show." But everyone knew the truth: Jimmy had been suspended indefinitely, and the whispers inside the industry were louder than ever. The cultural impact, however, belonged to Michael. He appeared on the cover of Variety a week later, dressed in a charcoal suit, standing tall against a matte gray backdrop. The headline was simple, "Still Standing." In the feature, he spoke about the ordeal. Not with bitterness, but with conviction. "I didn't walk off that stage to make a point. I walked off because I refused to let anyone dictate my narrative. I came there as a filmmaker. I left as a man who chose to speak up when it mattered." In a rare moment of public unity, social media, Hollywood, and the press all agreed that walk-off wasn't a scandal. It was a statement, a moment of resistance, a man drawing the line not just for himself, but for every actor, artist, or human being who had ever been invited to a stage only to be publicly dismantled. And that became the legacy of the night. Not Jimmy's downfall, not the chaos, but Michael's clarity, his dignity, the way he didn't shout to make a point. He stood his ground. He told the truth, and he walked away with the spotlight still behind him. Months later, Jimmy Kimmel reappeared, slowly, on smaller platforms. His return was quiet, stripped of bombast, but the shine was gone. He wasn't the same, and neither was the show. Because what happened that night didn't just expose a man, it exposed a system. And Michael B. Jordan, without ever raising his voice, tore it all down.